recently gave a AI Masterclass to my team at Kudos. So we're a team of about 20 engineers, designers, and growth folks. And I've been using both Cowork and Claude Code a lot. I am not an engineer. And because I was using it to automate so many of our things, like for example, I automated discovering new influencers on Instagram and actually reaching out to them and then keeping track of those communications. And that's something that we would have paid, thousands of dollars possibly to an agency to manage. And so I was doing things like that and I was presenting it to my team. And so I was asked to give this masterclass and I thought I'd share it with the rest of the world because I think that when it comes to defining the differences and the different use cases, especially for Cowork versus Claude Code, there is very limited information out there and not all of it is super useful. And so this is meant as a primer for people who might have some idea of how to use chat, Cowork, maybe even Claude Code, and defines exactly when you could use one or the other of these tools. Today, I'm really going to give you a very fast and broad taste of what Claude can do, especially for cross-functional teams. So I'm going to have operations, design, and growth examples. And so this is not to say that you won't benefit from it if you don't belong to one of these groups, because these workflows can be replicated and the principles and tooling behind them is just very similar. So hold on and follow through with the demo. I promise you there's going to be something for you here. Okay, so what you'll be able to do at the end of this session is be able to tell chat apart from Cowork and from Claude Code and know when to reach for one or the other. And the third thing, and finally the most important thing, is you'll be able to build something live no matter what your level of comfort and expertise is. Admittedly, I am going pretty fast and I'm covering a lot of range. I'll give you a sense of what you can do, and then maybe later on in a different session, I'd get into a little more detail and walk you through more slowly. Okay, so after the introduction, we're going to first do some examples with Cowork, and I'm going to kind of tell you what you can do with Cowork. And then I'm going to show you how to use Claude Code and show you how I use Claude Code as a non-engineer and what I find important. And then go over when to use one or the other. So we're going to have a lot of demos. This is going to be very demo heavy because I think it doesn't really make sense to walk through differences if you're not seeing Claude in action. And that's one of the frustrations I had actually with some of the videos out there, is it's not demo focused, it's just very high level. So in Cowork, we're going to do a morning brief. We're going to figure out how to automate a operations task, and then figure out how to automate a marketing design task. And then on Claude Code, we're going to figure out a partnerships problem, which is email outreach. And then we're going to do a UX research project. And then I'm going to show you how I work on Claude Code and give you some best practices from what I've learned. Okay, so the first thing I want to show you is like a very quick win on Cowork. So let me switch out of here and open up. Okay, so right now I'm on Claude Code desktop and I'd recommend you follow along with this. But basically I can use Cowork to, it's this middle tab right over here. And so I can switch between these three, but I'm in Cowork right now. But what's really neat about Cowork is we can set up scheduled tasks really easily. And I was using Claude Code to do this, and then Cowork came out and totally made that whole process redundant. So here's an example. All I have to do is something like, and I'm going to use this transcript to help me kind of transcribe what I want. Please set up a morning weekly brief where you pull in all my Slack messages and my emails and send me a 4 bullet point report as a Slack DM. And so that's all I'm saying, but you can, modify it to make it personalized to you. And then I just hit go. And what I didn't tell you is before this, I had actually added certain connectors to Cowork. So you can see over here Gmail, and then I have Slack. And all this does is it's still in Claude, hey, you have access to my Gmail and my Slack, and you can read, and depending on what permission you give, you can even write to these platforms. And it's saying, hey, you can talk to these platforms for me. So let me go back over here. And so that's something you'll have to do. And you can give it the time. So let's say Monday, 7 a.m. Sure. What should the brief cover from the past week? Slack DMs, key channels. Sure. And so it's asking you questions to see if, to make sure it's actually getting what you want. So I'm just going to let this run schedule command, and it's asking me to hit the go on this. It's written the prompt for me with a lot more detail than I gave it. So really what you would want to do is, and I'll show you how to do this after, go in here and modify it to make it personalized to you. So I'm going to hit schedule. Okay, so if I go to scheduled over here, I'm going to see here we go, a weekly Monday brief. And here are the instructions that it generated for me. And if I want to, I can go in here and edit what I want. And let me show you what this might look like. I'm going to open up my Slack so you can see. Okay, so this isn't quite what I had in my original brief, but basically it tells me who's out of office, what the email highlights are, the Slack catch up, and one thing that's fun is it also tells me, catches all the most recent and interesting things about Claude Code or Cowork, and then sends it to me and tells me, hey, watch and read this video, because I do consume a ton of content trying to learn the latest tricks and tips for these platforms. So yeah, super easy win over there. Okay, so you can think of Claude as having three different surfaces, kind of like three rooms you can walk in between. And that's not strictly correct, because it's not so easy to switch between these things to make them talk to each other, but they are all powered and harnessed by the same thing. So you probably know what chat is. It's the conversation window where you can ask Claude, hey, research this topic, or tell me how to do this, like tell me how to write a good marketing email. And it'll give you the list of things that it thinks are most important for your particular industry. But it's not going to do it. But with Cowork actually plugs into your files, your tools, and it can do the thing for you. You can tell it, hey, find out which partners have emailed me in the past week and draft the emails for me. And then it'll draft the emails, and all I have to do is go review them and hit send. With Claude Code, it's a platform where you can run repeatable systems, and it is a lot more flexible and powerful for tasks that you want to improve over time. And there's a lot of overlap here, and we'll get into that, but these are the three different things, three different surfaces that we're going to cover today. Okay, so really quick rule of thumb. I think that if you're going to run something once as a task that you just need to do one time, you would use chat or Cowork for it. If you're going to run it often and you actually want to apply judgment, there isn't a mechanical component to it, you would use Cowork and plugin. But you're running it often and it's mostly mechanical, meaning there are scripts running behind, it's very script driven, then I would use Claude Code. And then lastly, if it's browser heavy and you want really hard safety caps and you want the system to improve over time, let's say you're creating something and you want a lot of iteration to happen, then I would use Claude Code. And this is a rule of thumb. I came up with it. I think that this is the way to do things, but this is, I think this is up to a personal preference. Okay, so let's get into Cowork. All right, so let's dig into some real workflows in Cowork. And these are problems that our operations lead and our marketing design lead had. And so I was trying to figure out how we could solve it, and I decided to try and solve this in Cowork. And so I've already done this, and I'm going to show you how I did it in Cowork itself. So on the Reddit side, the problem was that each morning the operations lead would look for any mention of Kudos and then respond to the message. So if someone had a positive comment saying, hey, Kudos is really great, I really recommend it, or if someone had a negative comment, then she wanted to be aware so she could respond and be proactive and be able to engage with the community. And so I tried to figure out a way to automate the discovery of those messages. Let me open up Cowork and show you how I did it. So if I go over to this scheduled tab over here, you'll see that I have a Reddit Kudos brand monitor. So let me open this up. So the instructions are quite simple. It says monitor Reddit for any mention or many mentions of Kudos, and then send a summary to a Slack direct message to Miara, which is me. And so it's search Reddit for our brand name, so Kudos, join Kudos, and it also had a qualifier saying, hey, be careful, Kudos is a common English word, so don't pick up, threads where people say Kudos in a way that is unrelated to our brand. And then it would compile all of these things and then deliver it as a Slack message to me every morning. So this was running every single day until June 9th. It's about 10 days ago, when Reddit became very strict about any kind of AI browser interference. So this no longer works. But I want to show you what it did look like when it was working. Okay, so this is what it did look like. This is the Reddit brand watch from June. So it says this over so you can see it. Okay, most recent post was 12 to 13 hours ago. There's something in the John Kudos subreddit. It's something we had posted, and then it's flagging all the new posts, and then has recent context, and then has another flag there about Kudos. And so this would have been a really cool way of solving that problem. And yes, I guess this demo kind of falls flat in the sense that Reddit has blocked any kind of AI interference, and there is no official Reddit MCP to date, and so there's no way of connecting that either. But this is just an example of what could have been possible using Cowork. So if another platform, for example, has a connector or does not block AI from any kind of browser interference, this type of task would be possible. The other example I want to dig into is one of creating or making creatives for Meta Ads, TikTok ads, whatever, especially when it comes to static creatives. So usually I would brief her on which creatives are performing best and send her screenshots of them. Actually, this is now an HTML file, thanks to Cowork. And she would analyze and figure out, hey, these are the elements that are working, and then we would all brainstorm and then give her ideas for what to do. And it's additionally challenging because of Andromeda, Meta's new algorithm, Meta marketing algorithm, because if there are variations of ads that are too similar to each other, we will get dinged because they are flagged as duplicates. And so the ads cannot be slight variations of each other. So designers have a pretty hard job in today's world of creating truly distinct, compelling creatives for the brand. So I'm going to open up a new task over here, and what I'm saying is connect to the Meta MCP, and I'll explain what an MCP is later. But basically, it's just a way for Claude code to access our Meta ads and not only our performance, but our actual creatives and really see under the hood. So connect to the Meta MCP, analyze the top performing static ads, figure out the winning components, the images, and create true variations of those ads in this Figma file, keeping in mind the restraints with Andromeda. And then I paste it in the Figma file. So that's it, very simple. And yes, before this video, I had connected to the Meta MCP. So that's something that you would want to do, because Meta is going to be able to jump into my Meta Ads account, see which creatives are actually performing, come up with new variations and new ideas, and then actually create them in this Figma file. So this is something that might have taken a designer multiple days to do, right? So I'm going to click, let's go. And then it's possible it's going to ask me some questions. Okay, so it's asking me what look back window should I use for the Meta performance poll. I'm going to say just look at the past 5 days. How deep should I go on the UGC video analysis? For now, I'm going to say ignore. Yeah, I guess that's already there. Statics only. How many statics? Let's build 2 to 3. And let me show you the Figma file that we are working out of. So this is the file that I gave it access to. It has edit access to this Figma file, which has our creatives. But then on the side here, it's going to generate some creatives of its own based on what is working. So this Claude generated ads, these are all ads that were generated by Claude. It's pretty impressive because it was able to identify the winning elements and then recreate them in Figma, so that all the designer had to do is go in and make really small minor changes just to make sure it aligned with our brand. And there you go, Bob's your uncle. So you see it's identified the static winner, and it's pulling the actual details from the image library. So it's pulling the actual images from Meta to study it. Now, pre-Cowork, if a designer was doing this, I would have had to give her the creatives that were working, either point them to the creatives, or she would have had to be familiar with the Meta Ads Manager account and like looking through those reports, which is, not super UI friendly for someone who's not a marketer and someone who's strictly a designer. But here she doesn't have to do any of that. Meta is accessing all of these statics, all of the videos directly. It's identified what is working based on the past 5 days of data, pull the ROAS, the number of subscriptions we've had, how much we've spent, and then coming up with the themes, the concepts that it might want to replicate in the new statics that it has to build. And so here's the new statics that it's planned. And now I am allowing Claude to use Figma. And let's jump in here because you'll be able to see Claude making the videos live, which is kind of fun to see, kind of fun to watch it piece it together. Okay, so it looks like it started building some of the creatives. So your Chase Sapphire Reserve isn't paying for itself. So it's trying to replicate the FOMO that is working in our current ad set and the loss aversion. So it's a theme that it identified. Oh, there we go. So it's pulling in the card art because we know that is working for us. There we go, leaving the money on the table. That's something that is obviously working in the statics. The fear, the loss of leaving money or leaving points by not making use of all your credit cards he's touching on that. And it's just going to correct some of the card art because you can see that it's overlaying the H2 over here. See, it's looking at that overlap and realizing that the headline is too large. Oh, there we go. It repositioned it. So yes, this is taking a while, but this is something that you can set and forget. A designer can enter that prompt in and come back, an hour later to about 15 different creatives, which maybe 70% might actually be launched after a few tweaks. So yeah, really, really cool use case for growth tasks, in my opinion. And I don't know how many people are using it this way, but it's super nifty. The trick here is to have the connectors. So the Meta MCP connector, the Figma connector, so Claude can check the Meta performance and can check Figma and actually work in Figma. And the third thing, which I haven't touched upon yet, is the connecting to things like Atria. So Atria is a tool where you can spy on your competitors. And I have actually connected to Atria so that we can see the best performing ads of competitors and analyze trends there and then recreate those as well. So the combination of those three connectors and Cowork is just fantastic and totally underused by growth teams who are afraid of really leveraging AI. Okay, so this is going to keep running. Okay, so we saw two tasks that could be automated. One is a operations task, and then one is a growth task, design task. And you can see how super easy it is to use Cowork to do these things. Okay, something I do want to touch on that's really important is this idea of skills. The way I think of skills is it's a way of cloning your brain because it captures all the rules, all the judgment, all the things that you know into one single file and allows you to evoke that skill to do certain things. The other thing is that instead of saying the same thing over and over again, you can bundle a certain prompt or a certain way of doing things into a skill and save a lot of time by just running that one command. And I'm going to show you examples of how this works, but this is something that you absolutely have to be using in Cowork and in Claude Code. And you can see, and you'll see why it is in a little bit. Okay, so there are three building blocks in Cowork. And I know this is really dense, but stick with me. So one is connectors. So these are the things that I referred to before, things like the Figma connector, the Meta Ads MCP, Gmail. It is a way for Claude to interact with these tools and be able to do things on your behalf or analyze things on your behalf. And so it's really important that you figure out which connectors are going to empower your workflows and add them in and just start playing around with them. So for a growth team, for example, the thing you would want to add is the Meta Ads, MCP, Figma, Stack, really any number of tools. And it's really easy to connect. In under 30 seconds, you should be able to connect any of them. Though the only thing is certain connectors might need permission from an admin. So for example, when I had to add the Atria MCP, I had to ask my admin to do it because I didn't have permission. So if you run into that issue, just ask them. It's a 5-minute task for them. Okay, the second thing is a plugin. And you can think of a plugin as a way to package a workflow into one reusable kit. And you can actually share that with your team so that everyone on the team can run something in a very similar way. This is a little hard to explain in this very short video, but an example of this would be, let's say that I wanted to standardize the way that we created ads for Meta in Cowork. I would create a plugin that already had the Meta Ads MCP, had the Atria connector, had Figma connector, and had a bunch of skills that defined what was important for our brand in terms of the visuals, in terms of the messaging, that summarized the kind of jobs to be done, so that when Cowork was creating these ads, it was pulling in from a plethora of best practices and knowledge bases that we already have. So that's just one example of a plugin. And there are pre-made plugins already. I wouldn't necessarily advise using a pre-made plugin. I think a plugin becomes really powerful when it has your brain attached to it, but highly encourage you to check it out regardless. Okay, the third thing is a project. And a project is a persistent workplace for a initiative or a workflow that you have. And if it's something that you are doing repeatedly, I highly encouraging you starting in a project, because that is where memory, at least right now, the way Cowork is set up, memory is persistent, within a project. And so let me show you where some of these things live. So if I go to customize over here, this is where the connectors are. And so you can see the Figma connector, I have Gmail, I have Atria, I have Meta Ads MCP, and these were really, really easy to add. And if I wanted to create a plugin, if I go back over here, search. Okay, so there you have your answer. Is to create a plugin, all you have to do is talk to Cowork and tell it what you want to build, and it'll just build the plugin for you. And then it'll show up over here once you have it. But you can also add plugins, like pre-made plugins. So you have a bunch of different plugins that you can add. Product tracking, so yeah, really, really useful. And then you can find your skills over here. So these all live in this customize tab over here. And so you see I have a bunch of different skills. So one is Atria winning creatives, which is basically a skill to go spy on our competitors and tells it which competitors to spy on and what are the parameters to apply when grabbing those creatives. Before I jump to Claude Code and wrap up this Cowork section, I want to show you one more skill that I wrote. So you saw me creating meta creatives in Figma using Cowork, and I wrapped that prompt into a skill with a bunch of different instructions so that I didn't have to keep repeating it every week. So let's jump to it just so you can have a sense of how you should be using skills, because they're super useful. Okay, so you see this skill, Kudos Creative Studio. So here is a description of the skill on top. So as a reminder, you can find the skills through customize, clicking customize, and then skills, and then it's under your personal skills if you made the skill yourself. And so what this skill does is this skill turns the Meta Ads account into new creative. So that's basically the gist of it. It's looking at our existing Meta Ads and saying, okay, how can we create more creatives like that? So it pulls recent performance, figures out which ones are winning, has a concept brief, and then builds things in Figma. And then it explains what Andromeda is. This is not completely necessary, but I think having things like this will make sure that the creatives that it generates are truly distinct, because it is sunam budam. It is P0 for creating ads in Meta. So it explains what Andromeda is. It has that exact workflow, how to jump into the ad account. A bunch of credentials don't really live here. They live in my local folder as best practice. And so yeah, there you have it. And so if I want to run it, all I have to do is jump to a new task over here and then type Kudos Creative Studio. Create 3 new statics based on previous 5 days. That's all I have to do. And now it is evoking that huge prompt that I had in the skill section. And it is going to apply all of those parameters one by one and then actually create those in Figma. So very, very handy. I don't have to keep repeating myself or keep clarifying things because it's already all specified in that skill. So you can see how useful it is, right? The whole point of Claude is automating things and getting rid of redundancies. And so I would highly recommend playing around with skills. And to build a skill, what I would recommend is you start a new chat and you work with Claude to build something. And once you have perfected it and you are happy with the outcome, then you ask Cowork, hey, go ahead and wrap this into a skill for me, and it'll just do it for you. That is not the only way of creating a skill. If you go to customize and skills, you can actually create a skill this way. So create a skill with Claude, write skill instructions, or you can even upload a skill. So if you take one thing away from this video, it is skills. The second part of this tutorial is about Claude Code, and I'm going to walk you through the different ways that you can use Claude Code, and it really is not as intimidating as it seems. I hear people describe Claude Code as, hey, it's the ideal interface for engineers and non-engineers should use Cowork, and I think that is just not true. It is really easy to use Claude Code once you get the hang of it, and you don't have to use a terminal. You can use Claude Desktop itself. And once you learn a few tricks, it is extremely flexible and really easy to use, and I would encourage everyone to just Okay, so there are three ways you can access Claude Code. The first one you briefly saw earlier. It is in this Claude Desktop app. So you can see over here, this third little toggle over here. Let's see if I can grab this. So the third one over here is code. So if I tap into it, here I am in code, and you see a few different, it's a cute little icon over here, but this is one way of you interacting with Claude Code. The second way is directly through the terminal. So all you have to do is type in terminal. I have a F terminal, or in this case I have iTerminal, essentially very similar thing. And if I type in Claude over here, it's just going to open up Claude. And yes, I did have very slight configuration to install Claude so I can access it from the terminal. And I'll get into that in a different video. But since this is an overview, I can't do that here. The third way to use Claude Code is through AIDE. And that's just a way of having a interface that is a little nicer and easier to use. And the interface I use is called anti-gravity. So you can see this over here where, say I have a Claude session over here, I can type in anything I want, and then all the files appear over here. And then on the left side, I have the folder structure. So I can see the .claude file and all the subfolders, and it's super nice for a non-engineer. I tend to prefer switching between an IDE and terminal personally, depending on which stage of the project I am on. And I'll tell you why in a little bit. Okay, this next demo addresses an issue that one of our designers had. So they ran competitor analysis quite manually. There is a platform called Mobbin, and maybe let me sign in, see if I can give you a sense of what it's like. So Mobbin stores all the user flows for a number of different apps, so you can understand what the design is like, what the user experience is like, from Shazam to Rocket Money to even the New York Times. And so what designers usually do is they log into Mobbin, they go through the app, try and understand how paywalls are set up, for example, or how a certain connection experience is, to get inspiration for their own apps. And so super useful tool. But what our designer was doing was going in, analyzing these creatives, taking screenshots of them, putting them in a Figma file, and then analyzing them manually, and then writing up notes, summarizing them, and then coming up with her new ideas for how we could tackle a certain problem. And so my question really was about how we could automate this process instead of grabbing all of these things very manually and analyzing it manually. Before I jump into the demo, I want to walk through how I work with Claude Code, because especially as a non-engineer, I think that it's really important to spend time researching and understanding the scope of your problem and what the solutions are before you start doing anything. The second thing is to use plan mode extensively, and I'll show you how to do that, but it's a mode in Claude Code, and it's a great way of turning a vague idea into something that has a very systematized plan for implementation. And then within that planning is iterating. So you want to leave comments and definitely not accept the first plan that Claude Code gives you. You want to carefully read it and actually respond to it. If not, it's garbage in, garbage out, right? And then the fourth thing, I really like this skill by this developer called Matt Pocock. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, but he has some really great content. I actually have all his skills, and I use that in addition to the plan mode to when I'm about to build something on Claude Code. And this is really where I would say 70% of your time should go. And building is really the fastest thing. It's kind of hands off in a way, because as a non-engineer especially, you're not going to be able to read the code and really understand what's going on unless it's mostly in Python and you happen to know Python. All right, so let me jump to Claude Code and let's work on a project together. So I'm going to open up Anti-Gravity. So Anti-Gravity is one of the many IDEs out there. IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment. It's just a nice way to interact with different agents. This is actually built to work with Gemini, but I use it for Claude Code. So let me open up a new session over here. Okay. All right. So you can see over here that right now I am in edit mode, but if I do Shift Tab, I can go through different modes over here. So if you look over here on the bottom right of your screen, bypass permissions, that's not recommended that you use that because we now have auto mode. But anyway, here I am on plan mode over here. And this is what I mentioned before. This is a mode within Claude Code for you to be able to turn a vague idea into something concrete. So I'm going to use my transcription tool that I have to talk to Claude Code. I would like you to connect to the Mobbin MCP and help me carry out some UX research. What I'm trying to do is improve or come up with some ideas to A/B test our paywall. Our current conversion is 30%, and we're trying to increase that even more. And I would like to understand what competitors are doing. So your plan should include ideas for which competitors to get, what types of screenshots to extract, how to extract them and how to analyze them, and what the output should be. Ultimately, I'm going to present the analysis of these competitors to the head of design and our product manager. And so pretty broad prompt over here, but since I'm in plan mode, I'm going to send that through and just see what it comes up with. Oh, yeah, I guess I didn't say who we are. Our company is Kudos, and we are a financial technology company. We have some of the competitors off the top of my head are Rocket Money, NerdWallet, Credit Karma, credit card pointers. You can also pull our own onboarding screens and our current paywall to get a sense of what we can do to improve our paywall. All right, so it looks like it came up with a few questions. Most of your named competitors are, let's see, I want to say substitute best-in-class ideas. What should the final delivery be? A shareable web page with side-by-side screenshots, sure. Pulling Kudos on conversion data and paywall needs Redshift connection. I'm going to say for now skip our own data. But that's actually a really good idea to look at our own data. So you can see that the plan has popped up on the right over here, and it's formatted really nicely. This is one of the reasons I like using an IDE, is because it's just easier than using the terminal, in the planning stages at least. And one of the reasons for that is you can see over here, if I want to leave a comment, all I have to do is add a comment over here. This is great. Just add the comment and just keep going. So it has the different steps: extract the paywall screens. Step 3, analyze each paywall against a fixed scorecard. Step 4, synthesize A/B test hypotheses. Okay, this looks good. Step 5, build a visual teardown artifact. Okay. So let's say I want the competitors before we start. Please connect to the Redshift MCP and figure out which competitors we can analyze. I want those hard-coded into the plan. So I'll leave a comment. So you can add as many comments as I want, but at this stage, you really want to read this line by line, and really understand what Claude Code is planning, because you as domain expert, I'm not a designer, but as a designer, I would know what type of angle I want Claude Code to take when analyzing creatives, or I might want to integrate certain fail-safes to make sure that it's actually thinking about UX research the way I would. So right now I'm going to say no, keep planning, because it has all the... Okay, so it has addressed all of the comments that I had and has come back with the new plan. Okay. I'm going to escape this plan now, and then you can see that we're still in plan mode over here. I'm going to evoke the skill that I mentioned by Matt Pocock and say, grill me on the plan. And the reason I'm doing this is because I really want to have a very tight and well thought out plan. And I have found the grill me skill to be really excellent in these planning stages. And the grill me skill is, I think, just like 10 lines of code, not code, but 10 lines of instructions. It essentially says, grill me relentlessly on this subject until we arrive at a shared understanding. That's the main thing, and there are a few other things. And so now it's asking me actual questions, and it'll go through asking me a lot of different questions, and I will answer them. Okay, so what does your 30% conversion look like? Let's say I'm going to submit that. How should I get Kudos current paywall? So I would say, sure, pull it from Figma. And I can continue this way, but it's going to keep asking me questions and recommending certain things until we have a plan that has as few holes as possible. So the reason I think it's important to use Grill Me is because this plan step is really great, but it won't get you to 100%. You're going to end up iterating and improving things along the way. And the more you can front load all your planning and the scoping of the task, the easier it will be for you down the line. And that's why this is important. And Matt Pocock, the guy who came up with this Grill Me, said it's important to really use the skill in a way that's not passive. So instead of just, going with the answers it has, which I could do, I could type in a better explanation, and that'll guide the Grill Me process much better. But just to let you know, there might be up to 20, sometimes 30 questions, depending on how broad the project is. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna show you what I would do. To actually build this, which is the last step, which is I do Shift Tab and I go into auto mode, and I'll say, I am happy with the plan. I am happy with the plan. Let's go ahead and implement it. And then once I click OK, it's going to go, and then it's going to start implementing all the steps that it planned. But this itself is going to take a while. And I already did this, and I'm going to show you what it came up with. So this is the output, which was a inspiration board. So you can see it's looked at our competitor, Rocket Money, and it's analyzed the entire paywall to call out things that are favorable UI elements that we might consider. So for example, it says, hey, this whole paywall reads like completing a setup, not like making a purchase. So that's a really nifty observation. And then YNAB, it says, hey, having this social proof over here is doing a lot of work than having a feature list. So this might be important when we are thinking about, hey, what is the most impactful thing that we can do in the paywall? Is it to have a bunch of features listed, or is it to have social proof so that a user's anxiety about how a app is going to actually deliver value for them actualizes? So examples from Monarch, from Truebill, which is another competitor of ours. And so this is just one of the outputs that it came up with, but it's gone through all these competitors and it's done a really in-depth analysis on each of them. And it's also prioritized. If I go through this, I'll find an A/B test hypothesis. So it makes it really easy for the designer to determine what to A/B test first. You're changing the CTA. What do you want to have on the CTA? Having a single concrete social proof, trust stacking, personalizing the quiz right at the start. So here are all things ideas that it came up with in about an hour, maybe less than an hour, because it was able to pull all of the things from Mobbin, analyze them, and then bring them back to me. And so this is something that may have taken the designer 2 to 3 days to do properly. And here all the front loading of the work is done and makes the discovery process and the research process super seamless. Now this is something that could be done in Cowork, but for something that is repeatable and something that you want improving over time, I would recommend using Claude Code, which is why this demo lives in Claude Code. One of the reasons this demo lives in Claude Code. I want to underscore why research is so important before you start any Claude Code project. So I really didn't know what Mobbin was, so I was doing a bit of research on this after I heard how the designer on our team handled her workflow so manually. And I was asking ChatGPT, hey, is there an API or a plugin or an MCP for Mobbin that I could use with Claude Code? And it categorically said, hey, Mobbin does not appear to have an API or any kind of no official API MCP. And what it told me to do is to manually search Mobbin, grab the folders and the screens and save it locally, and then have Claude Code grab it from there. And so I just thought that was super manual and just did not seem to solve a huge part of the problem that our designer was facing, which was actually grabbing all that manually and then analyzing it. So I just kept pushing and I checked different LLMs. And what was actually true is that there was a Mobbin MCP and it already existed at the time of researching this. And it was super easy to implement. It was one line of code, single bash command that I had to type in. And the reason ChatGPT got this wrong is because it only has memory up to a certain point. Say its checkmark was about 6 months ago. And so at that time, Mobbin did not have an MCP. And so what you want to do is when you're in this research phase, you want to say something like research the internet or turn on web research to make sure it's actually pulling in the most recent information. And the other thing I like doing is in this research phase, I spend a lot of time with different LLMs because they will all give you different answers and be able to research the internet and give you solutions, a varied scope of solutions. So for example, Claude Code might say, hey, use Cowork to do something. Here's an MCP. ChatGPT might point you to a different solution. And so you want to check all of these platforms so you can really have a good sense of what is possible before you even start planning in Claude Code. Okay, I want to show you how I use a slash command in the terminal so you can also see what it's like working in the terminal. So I'm going to open terminal over here. So I'm in Claude Code. Actually, I need to jump to a different folder. So this might seem scary, but really all I'm doing here is I am changing directories. So CD is change directory, and I'm changing into this folder called Claude Code Projects, and this is called ROAS Slack Updates. Once I change in there, all I have to do is type in Claude, and I have a slash command that I created called ROAS report, and it's about maybe 200 lines of instructions about how to pull the data from our Meta Ads platform along with creatives and give me a performance update. And all I do every morning before I lead our growth meeting is I type in this command, and then I have this in about 5 minutes for my team. Okay, so you can see that the daily ROAS report popped up. And of course, I've redacted these numbers because they're confidential. But you can see that on the left, there's ROAS. On the right, you see the number of purchases, a really nice visual showing the trend over time, and broken down by Android and then iOS only. And then for each of the ad sets, I have a little heat map showing how they are progressing over time, because I want to see, hey, are these ad sets actually improving? What is the 7-day blended like? So we have an idea of what the trends are, because we want to keep an eye on them so we know if we want to switch them off or make adjustments to our marketing strategy. And then we also have the top ads over here along with pictures of the creatives, so we can quickly see, hey, which creatives are working for us, and are they declining, are they improving, what is their blended ROAS, and how many purchases are they driving. So we can quickly make decisions about, hey, let's switch this creative off, or let's funnel more money into it, or let's move it into the winning campaign. So this is very convenient because I just run this command once, and within about 5-10 minutes, this report pops up, and I'm easily able to share it with my growth meeting so that we can execute on decisions much faster. Okay, so last section hopefully will give you an idea of when to use Cowork or when to use Claude Code. And this might be a little dense, but hopefully you can stick with me. Okay, so when it comes to control and flexibility, Claude Code definitely wins out. You are able to shape every step of the way. So you saw with Claude Code, we got on plan mode, we did grill me, we were able to change things and tell Claude Code, hey, here's exactly what I want to do and how I want to do it. And that's not to say you can't do that with Cowork, but Cowork has less control by design. You kind of just say, hey, this is what I want to do, and just trust that it's going to do it correctly. And if you want to be highly specific, there are ways of doing it, but it's super clunky. In terms of saving points, Claude Code has this thing called /rewind, where you can restore to certain checkpoints. And then, of course, it has Git history. So if you are committing to GitHub along, it's with code. As far as I know, there's no way of committing anything to GitHub, and things are saved. And I don't think there's a way of actually changing back to a previous version. So a lot less control. Let's say that you built something and you realize, hey, no, this is actually much worse than my previous version. It's much harder to do that in Cowork than it is in Claude Code for that reason. And in terms of improving whatever you have built, definitely Claude Code wins, because your improvements improve over time as you add rules, and as instructions and memory get saved over time. Whereas with Cowork, yes, memory does improve over time, but it is really cumbersome to, for example, edit a skill or a plugin versus with Claude Code, where you can just talk to it and get it to do it immediately. Cowork has the ability to do scheduled tasks. Actually, before Cowork came out, I spent about an hour and a half setting up my morning brief. And then Cowork came out, and I was able to set up that same brief in a matter of 5 minutes. So Cowork can be extremely powerful for setting up recurring tasks that are very simple and very scoped. With Claude Code, this is also possible, and you have a lot more control over what you do, and you can do more complicated things. For example, there is slash loop, where you can recur a command every hour, every minute, whatever it is, or you can even run GitHub Actions so that when your laptop is closed, it'll still run. Whereas with Cowork, if your laptop is asleep, then that schedule, that morning brief is not going to run. But there are ways around that, so it's not a huge drawback. The other thing that I think is useful is I prefer the way Claude Code works and the way its memory has improved over time. It now has this thing called auto memory and auto dream that consolidates conflicting instructions and remembers things that you have said in your preferences over time. Whereas with Cowork, as far as I know, memory persists only within projects, and it's harder to maintain memory across a lot of different sessions that are not pointed to a project. Mobile handoff, yep, it's possible in both Claude Code and Cowork, so you can easily be vibing when you're by the ocean or by the river or commuting. The last thing that I would like to point out is Cowork defaults to controlling your browser for a lot of tasks, including things like reading Google files, reading, say for example, that Reddit example. It opens up your browser and it's like looking through that information. And that's tends to be very token hungry because it is applying judgment every single time it's doing that. Whereas when you're building something with Claude Code, you might use, or I would recommend that you use something like an MCP, or you connect your API key so that the repetitive section of the work is mechanical. You don't need judgment to actually read through a CSV file. What you need is a Python script. But Cowork might not work that way. It usually just looks at the entire CSV file and it's applying judgment every single time. And so that's why when you're using Cowork for a task that you might do in Claude Code, you might be using a lot more tokens. Okay, so Cowork or Claude. So for something like a morning brief, I would highly recommend you using Cowork because it is a task that, yes, it is repeatable, but the scope is extremely small and the connectors already exist. So it's much easier to set that task up in Cowork. For doing something like influencer discovery and outreach, and this is a project that I created, it not only used Chrome DevTools to open up different browser tabs and look for influencers, but it also reached out to them, maintained this database and updated the database. It was very complicated and I had to keep changing and improving it over time. And because of that, Claude Code is the best place to create something like that. If you're doing a one-off creative tweak, like for example, you want to create like 5 creatives really quickly in Figma, definitely Cowork. Let's say that you want to create YouTube videos for your brand and you want to the performance data and come up with new ideas, definitely Claude Code. If you want to scan a social platform for mentions, assuming the platform hasn't banned the AI, Cowork is the answer. If you want to create an ad creative machine that is performance based, I think either Cowork or Claude would work, but I would recommend using Claude Code for that. a one-off competitor analysis, because it's a one-time thing, it'll be Cowork. But if you want to have a recurring weekly compets, like it's better over time, definitely Claude Code. So yeah, basically, if it's a one-time job and it's thoughtful, use Cowork. But if you're doing something very often and it's mechanical, I would use Claude Code. Okay, so yeah, there we go. I hope that this has been helpful to you. Please feel free to leave any comments or questions. And in the upcoming video, I will break down these concepts into smaller bits and dive into them. I know this is a super dense session.